ask them if they can. I think we'll get started here. I'd like to welcome everybody for coming. Can you hear me okay, everybody?
Yes.
I could use a microphone if you like, but, okay. I'm Lewis Heaton, and I'm a farmer rancher in Burley Martin in Grant County. And I've got a presentation on wildlife-friendly grazing practices, and they told me I could talk about anything I wanted to, so I put a few other things in there too that might not be exactly have to do with wildlife and grazing, but hope you we get through it here. First, I'd like to thank, when we started a little history on our ranch. My grandfather owned a quarter of land here in the 20s, so we've been in operation about 100 years, and my dad had bought another quarter when he was in the Navy, sent his paycheck home when he was in the service in World War II, and that's how we started. It's been built over the years. And what we do, we graze about 6,000 acres of native rangeland, and then we have a farming operation that goes with it. We run about 500 pairs most years of cattle, and that's basically what we do. I've got some pictures here of our ranch. Well, first I'll give you the overview. We have some ranch views, and then we have a livestock and grazing practices, and they've kind of got them broke up into spring and summer, and winter grazing. And then we have the wildlife portion, and then we've also got, I did an owner observation and the changes in wildlife population with managed grazing and no-till farming, and then I got a little segment on family goals. And this is a picture of our West Ranch out in Grant County. It's the breaks above the Heart River. It's a very pretty place, and when we go out there, it's always a pleasure to be there, and you see nature like it was and like it is, and we'd like to see it stay that way. It's very pretty. This is also out in Grant County. That's Beaver Creek that runs through there. We have a lot of our pastures have flowing water through them, and it's a really important part of the ecosystem. And this is a picture I took up on a bluff of our cattle grazing down below. We've got a family operation. There's myself and my wife, and then my sister and her husband, and my mother, and also my daughter. But one of the things, my sister and I ran the ranches mostly, and our spouses had off-farm jobs. But one of the things we always fought about was who gets to go out and help move cattle out here. Because there's a lot of things on the farm and ranch we don't like to do, but it's always a pleasure to be out there and see what beauty it is. And this picture is Apple Creek. This is in Burley County. It's also flowing water. That's Beaver Creek out in Grant County. That's the same creek. It's a pretty rough place out there with lots of cliff banks on it. Not really easily accessible, but it's very nice. The next section I have is on the livestock and the grazing system, and here's some cows happily grazing down in the bottomland there. Flowing water. Just a picture of we run a big rotation of, we have about 50 pastures, and we monitor them daily or every other day, and every year is different. We do write up a schedule on how to move them, and but it always, you have to change it with the weather conditions. Sometimes you have more rain, you have no rain, you have wind, hailstorms, lots of different things. This is a picture I took of a pasture in Morton County. This was 2017. This pasture hadn't been grazed. You can see the four-wheeler tracks. It was so brittle, broke the grass off. I just put that in here because this is that same pasture in 2018. A little different place, but look how quick grass can recover if you keep it in a good condition, for regrowth. And here's a picture of grass too, and I just put this in because you can see how nature can really produce. When you follow a drought up with the rain, you have built your fertility up and you can really recover quickly. I also have a red four-wheeler. Sometimes if the grass is higher, I have to use that one so I can find it. And then here's a picture of two different pastures. One's been grazed and one hasn't. And I'm by no means an expert, but looking at your grass and conditions, and it can change really fast. A lot of times you go out there and everything looks good, and then if you leave them 2 more days, it can change really fast. We have pastures that some of them we only graze 1 or 2 days, and probably the longest is 20. And as we progress, we put more pastures in. We try to keep the expense down with just an electric fence, something you can move that's portable, you can change. This is a tree in one of my cornfields, and I had somebody tell me, well, why don't you take that tree out so you can farm through it? And I said, well, I could, but that tree is probably older than I am, and it gives a place for the wildlife to go through and the birds can nest in it. And then it also gives us a picture that you have of, we can farm with nature and we don't. The practices we do, the tree's still alive and it's flourishing. So it's just a nice tree. There's some more cattle grazing in the bottom land there. And then when we get into, that was mostly the spring and summer grazing. Now when we get into the fall, we graze some cover crops, and then I've been working on grazing some alfalfa. This picture's in Burleigh County, and this was, you can see there was electric fence there, or there is electric fence there, and this field was hayed once, and then this is a second growth, and you can see on the right it hasn't been grazed, on the left we graze it. And it's kind of interesting how cattle graze alfalfa. They actually just strip the leaves off it and leave the stem, so you have your crown in place yet, and you don't have a winter kill. So it's something to add on, that we add on at the end of the season when our native pastures are starting to dry up and we need to get off them. And this is a picture of grazing corn stalks in the winter. These cows are, we have predominantly black, we have all black Angus cows, moderate frame. They have to take care of themselves. We calve late, and we usually don't wean till probably late November, sometime in December, and we try to run the cow-calf pairs on the corn stalks for a while if we can. Some years we get too much snow, but we usually plan for 60 to 90 days of corn stalk grazing, and we figure that time of year, economically, that's a big plus for your financials. And then my next section is on wildlife. This is on the deck of my house. There's 2 bull moose running across the field in front of my house. There's a different bull moose out in a soybean field. And I know when I was younger, like in the 70s and even the 60s, when we farmed and ranched, we had a lot of summer fallow. We did a lot of fall tillage. We had season-long grazing in our pastures, and we just didn't have a lot of wildlife. But with the practices that we've put in, we see a lot more wildlife than we did before. And the wildlife, since we don't fence them in, they go where conditions are the best for them. And I think that's a tribute to everybody that does improvements on their ranches. There's some deer in some grassy spots with some trees around it, and this is a beaver dam. This is out in this is in Grant County and along the creek there. And they're really good engineers. Now this I just took here a couple of weeks ago. This picture, and 2 weeks before that wasn't there. And this is a place where there's not a lot of mature trees that they can and brush that they can pull in and make a dam. So when we had those 2 weeks of rainy weather and the soil got soft, they pulled that mud up there and made a little dike all the way around the outside, way out, 40 feet on the other side on the bare ground. And how they did that without having a transit or something, it's pretty good, And then places where they have access to brush, and of course they pull them in and make dams. You can come out there, sometimes the creek will be 2 feet higher in one place. Here's a porcupine. You can see where he ate his way up that tree, eating the bark off it, and when he got full, then he decided he would take a little nap up there, and I don't know how that supported him, but that's where he was. This is a snapping turtle, and they're kind of a prehistoric looking thing. Then we have a lot of waterfowl. These are geese here in the spring, and along with the cornstalk grazing, we graze the corn stalks off, and then those fields that we farm, rather than having to, use some kind of tillage on it, we recycle it through the cattle. And then if there's any individual kernels of corn in the spring, the geese and the ducks will come and pick it off, and you don't have a lot of volunteer corn in your crop. So it's a great cycle of nature. And just a little thought about history and things. This is in Burleigh County, and we have a mile of shoreline on Stony Slough over there, and which has had, I think since the 30s, there's been the Federal Fish and Wildlife they've done a nesting survey on it. So it's interesting to see, excuse me, of course with waterfowl, it changes every year how much ponded water you have. But anyway, it's interesting to see if we can kind of, as we try to use some grazing techniques that are, more friendly to waterfowl nesting, how we can actually see that progress happen. And then along with that, there's a little history on that. When I bought that land, I don't know, 25 years ago, I think it was probably. But anyway, when I read through the abstract, this land was also owned by the Marquis de Morris, excuse me, from Medora. So it's kind of interesting about the history. This is a picture of, if you can see in the middle, there's 3 eggs there, and that's a killdeer nest. And it's this is where we feed our cows in the winter. This is late spring. And they've got it pretty well trampled up by then, but that was and I would have never saw this but I saw the killdeer flush off there. And the reason I put that there, it shows how friendly livestock grazing is with wildlife. I suppose it happens, but I have never seen a nest that has been damaged by, livestock. Usually they'll flood, whatever it is, a duck or a pheasant or any kind of bird like that will flush, and the livestock won't bother. And then just another bird here, but there's one of the things we think about, when we think about ducks and geese, we think about hunting, but there's a lot of interest in just bird watching. And this is just a bird that was watching my cows, I guess. But anyway, there's a lot of when you travel around the country, there's a lot of people they're not really interested in hunting, but they're interested in wildlife, and they're interested in looking at birds and those kind of things that we don't really think about because we see them all the time. Excuse me, this is what I think is a juvenile prairie falcon, and it's a big downy bird, and it's really cool to see. They nest out in the prairie. They don't nest up in trees, from what I can understand. So they're a real interesting native bird. This is just some antler drops that I pick up in the spring so I don't get flat tires. And then there's some game birds. These are pheasants. This picture was there's a couple of mature geese, and they've got all their little goslings following them across the road, moving from one side to the other. It was just a really interesting picture. They can barely walk, but it was interesting to see that. It's just a picture of a frog. You can see how well he matches in with the grass. And this is a northern pike. It was caught out of some of our creeks, and it just goes, the creeks that have gravel beds on the bottom are really good spawning areas for fish. It's gonna be all part of the Missouri River system. So if you have this in our patches, I feel like we've got a good system going where you can have reproduction. The water quality is good enough for the fish. So then I got a little segment on owner observations. These are two people I worked with a lot in the past. That's Jay Fuhrer, he used to be with the NRCS here in Burley County, and then Kenny Miller, well, you probably know him. He was one of the grazers here in Burley County. Them, along with people from the NRCS and the soil conservation districts and the game and fish, excuse me, a lot of people have really helped me along the way. They've been really, really good at answering any questions I had, encouraging us to try different things. Not everything we did worked, but they've been really helpful. And I'll even go on as far as the financial. And when you talk to a banker, they are interested in your financials, but they're interested in what your ranch and farms look like and what kind of improvements you're making in your soil health. These are cannonballs that fall out of the creek bank every spring when the frost goes out. They'll run them. They're a mineral thing. They're kind of interesting, when I pick them up and put them in the yard. This is just a picture of a kind of a road that doesn't go anyplace, but it's kind of, as owner observation. I use it as we kind of know where we want to go, but you really can't see where you're from this, what's there until you get over it, And you can see there's two sets of tracks we got over where we wanted to go, and we came back, And then we have some family goals. This is my family. That's myself and my wife Sherry, my daughter Ella, my mother Harriet, and my sister Colleen and her husband Albert. And there's my mother and my daughter and myself. My mother, this was just taken this fall. She's 92, but she's really interested in what we do on the farm. She wanted to go up and see what the kids put in the bin, so she ran up that stairway to see what we did. And here's a picture of the 3 generations of us. Part of our ranch has been in the family for 100 years, and there's 3 generations of us there. And I hope in 100 years from now there's another 3 generations of our family that's there. Then kind of on a personal thing, I think it's good to get off your farm and ranch, do some other things, get an interest in. So I took up surfing here a few years ago, and after I almost drowned a couple times, I had a lot of fun. But it's not the point of surfing. It's that when you see things that you get away from. Sometimes we get so bogged down with farm and ranch, and that's all we talk about. But when you get in around the rest of the country, you might see things a little different in where our place is, and kind of gives us a better perspective, on where we are in relationship with the rest of the country and the world. And that's about all I had. I've got Levi Jacobson. He's with the North Dakota Game and Fish. He's a private land biologist, and he'll give a little presentation about some of their programs. And then afterwards, after he's finished, then we'll have a question and answer period.